Hello and welcome to IP Study video lectures. Today we will discuss chapter 6 of grade 7. The chapter name is The Age of Reorganization. In this chapter we will discuss these topics: Age of Reorganization, then Rise of Shungas, Satavahanas, Chedis, Kingdoms in the South, Indo-Greeks invasion, and the emergence of Kushanas. So first we will go. In the previous chapter, we have learned about the powerful empire, Mauryan Empire. It was one of the largest empires in the Indian history. It brought much of the subcontinent under one rule. However, after the great emperor Ashoka passed away, the empire began to disintegrate into different kingdoms. We know little about the successors of the Ashoka. The general Pushyamitra Shunga, who assassinated the last ruler of Mauryan Empire. This marked the end of the mighty Mauryan Empire. Now come to what is the age of reorganization. What is age of reorganization? The fall of Mauryan Empire, and it is disintegrated into different parts due to many reasons. For example, areas that had earlier paid taxes to the Mauryan Empire, provinces that were ruled by Mauryan governors, territories that quickly declared independence when the central power weakened. Next is what does it mean? It means the political map of India was now changing. That means that everything being reshaped and restructured. Old kingdoms disappeared and new ones emerged. These new kingdoms did not remain silent. They all wanted to become the most powerful kingdom of that time. So they used the techniques of peaceful method and forceful method. In peaceful method, marriage alliances, trade agreements, diplomacy means where messages or ambassadors were sent to avoid war and maintain peace. And in forceful methods included battles and wars, sieges, where cities were surrounded and supplies cut off to force surrender, and last one is military alliance. These are the ways they used to become the powerful kingdom. Next is the rise of Shungas. After the fall of mighty Mauryan Empire around 1885 BCE, a new dynasty called Shunga dynasty emerged that time. It was founded by Pushyamitra Shunga, who had once served as the army general under the last Mauryan emperor Brihadratha. In the surprising turn of event, Pushyamitra killed Brihadratha and took control of the throne himself. This event marked the beginning of the Shunga rule in northern and central India. As you have seen map here, the Mauryan Empire disintegrated into different kingdoms. For example, Shunga. Here is the map also. Shungas, Satavahanas, Chedis, Shakas, Indo-Greeks here, and Kushanas. Indo-Greeks, Kushanas, these are some foreign invasions that came to Indian subcontinent during that period of time. And Satavahanas, Shungas, Chedis, Shakas, these are the part of the Mauryan Empire that time. Chedis, Pandyas and Chola already in the power during the Mauryan Empire also. Now come to the social life of Shunga dynasty. Shunga period witnessed a golden revival of Sanskrit literature and language. And another significant development during this period was the compilation of Yoga Sutras by Patanjali. Next we have administration. Shunga administration was less centralized than the Mauryan Empire. Pushyamitra ruled as the central king, but he gave considerable autonomy to local governors and regional chiefs. The empire was divided into two provinces, each headed by the governor, who was often a member of royal family or a trustable nobleman. Military organization remained important. The Shungas faced constant threat from Greeks, Greek invaders in northwest, and other regional powers. Now come to the art and architecture. Art and architecture of all the kingdoms are flourished during that time. The Shunga period produced some of the most beautiful examples of early Indian art, architecture and sculpture. The most famous example is the Bharut Stupa that is present day in Madhya Pradesh. Bharut Stupa is different from the Sanchi Stupa, as Sanchi Stupa has dome-like structure, but Bharut Stupa is kind of cylindrical structure in shape. Now, while the original stupa was likely built during Ashoka's time, Shungas added magnificent carved stone railings around it. Then, while the Bharut Stupa itself no longer stands, its remains, including gateway, railings, are preserved at the Indian Museum in Kolkata. Now come to here is the Bharut Stupa depicted on the fringes, then east gateways and railings of the Bharut Stupa, a panel showing worship of Dharmachakra. Now come to the next topic is Satvahana. Satvahana, here you can see the map, the Satvahana Empire. It is dominated in the part of Deccan. The Satvahana were one of the most important ancient dynasties in Indian history. They ruled approximately 230 BCE to 220 CE, primarily in the Deccan region. The Satvahana dynasty rose to power shortly after the fall of the Mauryan Empire and founded by the ruler named Simuka. His leadership marked the beginning of one of the longest lasting dynasties in the ancient Indian history. This empire included areas are now part of Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Karnataka and Madhya Pradesh, mostly the region of the Deccan Plateau. Based on the available evidence, the Shunga Empire likely had conflict with Satvahana. These two powerful dynasties ruled neighboring regions, and it is possible they fought over a land and control. Now the trade and commerce of the Satvahana Empire. During their rule, the Satvahana were renowned for their strong trade and commerce. They had active trade network that extend beyond India. Reaching far as Roman Empire, they traded goods such as spices, textiles, sandalwood, luxury items. These are the things they trade. Then their major capital cities are Pratisthana and Amravati. At the height of their power under rulers such as Gautamiputra, Satkarni and Pullu Mavi. Now come to the coins. Through coins, we got to know that trade is also flourished during that time. The Satvahana were among the first Indian rulers to widely use coins, and these coins provide valuable insight into their economy, trade and culture. Their coins have been discovered in many parts of India, from Gujarat in the west to Andhra Pradesh in the east, showing that their empire had a vast trade network. They made coins from lead, copper, bronze, silver during that period of time. Now come to here are the few examples. You can see the Satvahana coins were where animals were punched on these coins, as you have seen. Here is a bull, and here is we can say lion. These are the animal figure on the Panchmark coins. Now come to the agriculture. The Satvahana ruler encouraged farming by giving tax-free agricultural land grants to Brahmins and the Buddhist monasteries. They built irrigation system including tanks and canals to support farming. The fertile river valley of Krishna, Godavari and other rivers in their territory supported a large farming population. Now we have art and architecture and literature of the Satvahana period. The Satvahana art represent golden period of the Indian artistic achievement. They made significant contribution to Buddhist art, architecture in ancient India. Some of the most famous example of their art can be seen of beautiful sculptures at Sanchi and Amravati. These sites have detailed carving that depict scenes from the life of Buddha and Jataka tales. Jataka tales is kind of stories of the Buddha. So these stories, here you can see the sculptures and architecture of Satvahana. The Satvahanas were also known for the rock cut architecture. What is rock cut architecture here? Rock cut architecture is from one you can say rock, you carve that rock and create sculptures and temples and detailed figures from that rock. So that is kind of rock cut architecture. They carved out of impressive caves that places like Karla and Bhaja, which were used as Buddhist monasteries. Here is the Karla caves, Bhaja caves and cave 10 of Ajanta caves. Then the Satvahana rulers supported literature in Prakrit. Most of their inscriptions and coin feature legends in Prakrit and were written in Brahmi script. Now come to the life under Satvahana. So the most interesting part of Satvahana society was a significant role of a royal woman, particularly queen mothers. In Satvahana dynasty, queen had real influence and played a crucial role in making important decisions for the kingdom. So the Satvahana followed a unique tradition in which princes were often named after their mother. For example, here is her name is Queen Gautami Balashri. So his son name is Gautami Putra Satkarni. Gautami, his mother's name, Gautami, and Gautami Putra Satkarni. Like this. Queen Gautami Balashri was not only the mother of the king but also a powerful and active ruler during that period of time. She is known to have donated land to Buddhist monks, showing her support to religious learnings also. At Nasik, she had inscriptions carved, proving that she was one of the most influential royal women in ancient history. There is one more example of queen. Satvahana queens come from the Naneghat caves near Pune, that is in Maharashtra. Inscriptions on the walls of these caves tell the story of widow queen who performed important Vedic ritual including Ashwamedha Yajna. What is Ashwamedha Yajna? The horse we freed the horse to roam and then he just roam around the villages, nearby villages, and if anyone, any kingdom or any village stop that horse, that means they will fight against each other, and if that horse will just go through that village, that means that village will come under the power of the Satvahana rulers. Now here are also the inscription that also mention Vedic gods such as Indra, Chandra, Surya, indicating that although Satvahana supported Buddhism and they also respected Vedic tradition. As you have seen, they were very much religious tolerance they do. As you have seen the Hindu gods, Buddhism and Vedic tradition also, and the you can say some Jainism part also. So they are very religiously tolerating people. Next we have the Naneghat inscriptions also contain some of the earliest example of number symbols that resemble the numericals we use today. These ancient number symbols written in Brahmi script provide strong evidence that our modern numbering system originated in India thousands of years ago. Here is the Naneghat inscriptions image you can see. Here we can say these are the Brahmi script. Brahmi script 1, 2, 4, 6. They are deciphered by our historians. The Satvahana were devoted followers of Vasudeva. This demonstrates their connection to Vaishnava tradition. Despite their personal religious belief, Satvahana rulers supported scholars and monks from different religious traditions. They gave tax-free agricultural land to Vedic scholars, Jain monks, Buddhist monks for the meditation and for the studies also. By the 3rd century CE, the Satvahana Empire slowly broke apart into smaller, independent kingdoms, and this occurred primarily due to weaker central control and economic decline. Next, their achievement in art, trade, administration, and religious support had a profound influence on many dynasties that followed them. Now, next is the Chedis. Here is the region, important cities of Chedi Empire. In the previous chapter, we have learned about the importance of Kalinga in the ancient Indian history. After the decline of Mauryan Empire, Kalinga rose up power again under the Chedi dynasty, founded by Mahameghavana around the 1st century BC. So that the famous king of that time is Kharavela, the third and the most powerful ruler of the Chedi dynasty, ruled the kingdom of Kalinga for around 13 years. He is often referred as a monk king because he lived simple life and disciplined life. Next he took a great pride in protecting and ensuring the repair of temples belonging to various faiths. This spirit of harmony and respect for all beliefs reflects a key aspect of India's cultural values, often referred to as the Indian ethos. Now, King Kharavela's most significant achievement was leading successful military campaigns. In the north, he marched as far as the Ganga Valley and fought against the Shunga dynasty Greek kingdoms. In west, he led battles against the Satvahana in the Deccan region. The most important source of information about Kharavela is the Hathigumpha inscriptions that are shown here. Hathigumpha inscriptions. From the Udayagiri caves. It is carved on the walls of Udayagiri caves near Bhubaneswar. This inscription is written in Prakrit language using the Brahmi script, as you have seen before also, comprises 17 lines. It tells us about Kharavela's life and rule year by year. Now come to the kingdoms in the south. These are the kingdoms in the south: Chola, Chera and Pandya. These kingdoms frequently competed with one another as they tried to expand their territories and establish themselves as a dominant power in the South India. The South Indian kingdom come in power during the time period of 2nd to 3rd century BC. During this period, a body of literature known as Sangam literature was composed. So what is Sangam literature? Sangam literature is one of the greatest treasure of ancient Indian culture and writing. Sangam literature means the stories of different kinds, you can say. The word Sangam comes from the Sanskrit word Sang. For example, different kinds of story combined together, and that is called Sangam. Now, in this context, it refers to the assembly of Tamil poets and scholars who came together to compose and share poems. What makes Sangam literature truly special is that it gives us a vivid and detailed picture of life in the ancient South India. It's kind of stories. Then through these poems, we gain insight into people's daily lives, their emotions, their beliefs, customs, love, war, trade, and society. The Cholas during the Sangam period, the Cholas emerged as one of the most powerful kingdom in the South India. They ruled over the fertile Kaveri river valley, which became a center of their empire. Their capital was Urayur near modern day Tiruchirappalli. The earlier rulers were known as the Sangam Chola. Now this symbol represents their bravery and fierce rule, which is why they were often referred as the Tiger Dynasty. Next come to the Karikala, also helped build the port city of Puhar. Karikala was the famous ruler of the Chola dynasty. Puhar, also called Kaveri Pattinam, at the mouth of Kaveri river. Under his rule, Puhar became an important center for trade and commerce, attracting ships from across the seas. Another significant achievement of Karikala Chola was the construction of Kalanai, also called the Grand Anicut, one of the India's oldest and most important dams, built just below Srirangam Island, where the Kaveri river splits. This ancient dam was designed to divert water to southern and central part of Kaveri Delta. It helps increase farmland and turn the area into the rice bowl of South India. Amazingly, the dam is still used today, proving how advanced Karikala's engineering was. Here is the dam, Kalanai or Grand Anicut Dam. Here is the image of that dam. Just think about the architecture of during that period of time. It is still there with us. Next, we have the case study of the tale of the anklet, Silapadikaram. Here is one of the story. Next, come to the Cheras. The Chera dynasty, one of the three major kingdoms of ancient South India, alongside the Chola and the Pandyas. They were also known as Kerala Putra, which means son of Kerala. The Cheras ruled over 1,000 years for approximately 300 BCE to 1102 CE, making them one of the longest lasting dynasties in Indian history. So next is their history is divided into two main periods, the early Cheras and the later Cheras, also known as Perumal dynasty. Sangam literature described the Cheras as brave, generous ruler who controlled the rich spice trade. Even Roman and Greek records mention the Chera and their land, which they referred as Damirika. The Chera ruled over the area that is now mainly Kerala and western Tamil Nadu. In the early period, their capital was Vanchi, modern-day Karur in Tamil Nadu. Later, they ruled from Mahodhyapuram in Kerala. Next is the Chera minted coins mainly in copper and silver, occasionally in lead. These coins featured important symbols including bow and arrow, as well as elephants, fish and tigers. The Chera become powerful due to the valuable spices grown in their land, including black pepper, cardamom, cinnamon and ginger. These spices were in high demand worldwide and were even more valuable than gold in places like Roman Empire. Many traders from Rome, Arabia, China visited in Chera ports to purchase these spices, in exchange for which they brought gold, silver and luxury goods. Their busy port cities helped the Cheras grow rich and famous, playing role in connecting India with the ancient world. Here are the coins of Cheras and inscription from the Cheras. Now come to our next topic, the Pandyas. The Pandya kingdom was one of the oldest and most powerful kingdoms in South India. According to ancient Tamil text, the dynasty was founded by the king Kulashekhara Pandya and their capital was Korkai. Here are the foreign visitors like Megasthenes, Greek ambassador, described the Pandya kingdom in his book Indica as rich and well-governed. Other rulers like Kharavela of Kalinga mentioned receiving pearls from the Pandyas, highlighting the significance of their thriving trade network. Now come to during the early Pandya period, art and architecture began to take place. As we have already discussed, in every kingdom, art and architecture flourished during that period of time, laying the foundation for rich Tamil temple culture that followed. Artistic work including terracotta. Terracotta you have already studied during the Harappa civilization. Early stone reliefs and decorative carvings, temple walls, pillars were adorned with simple carving of deities, animals, floral patterns. Here are also you can see temples from during the time period created by the Pandyas. Now come to the many inscriptions from the Pandya period shows that king cared deeply about the welfare of their people. These writings found on stone temple walls inform us about how ruler constructed tanks, wells, roads to support farmers and traders. Now come to the Indo-Greek invasions. In previous chapter, we have learned about Alexander the Great and his attempt to conquer India. Although he had won many battles, his dream of reaching further into Indian subcontinent was stopped when his soldiers refused to cross the Behis River. They were tired, homesick, and afraid of powerful Indian armies ahead. Left no choice, Alexander turned back. As he retreated, he appointed local governors to rule the regions he already conquered. Next, after the death of Alexander, his vast empire began to break apart. Many of the local governors declared independence and set up their own kingdoms. For example, his general Seleucus took over Persia and Bactria, forming the Seleucid Empire around 250 BCE. Bactria's Greek governor declared independence, establishing the Greco-Bactrian kingdom. These rulers and their descendants invaded northwestern India around 185 BCE and came to be known as Indo-Greeks. They ruled parts of northwestern India and blended Greek and Indian culture in distinctive way, especially in art, language, and coins. Here you can see the Indo-Greek Empire. Next, after the mighty Mauryan Empire began to weaken and eventually collapsed, the northwestern region of ancient India became vulnerable to foreign invasions. The northwestern region, present-day Pakistan and Afghanistan, as you have already seen in the map, has always been important because it controlled the mountain passes that connected India with Central Asia. The Indo-Greeks expanded into Indian territory. These Indo-Greek rulers came initially as conquerors, seeking to expand their kingdom and control the wealthy trade routes that passed through the region. What makes Indo-Greek period fascinating is that these foreign invaders gradually adapted to Indian culture rather than simply imposing their own tradition. Here is their, you can say, their culture blend with Indian culture. Practical and social reasons are local acceptance, administrative efficiency, religious and cultural appeal. The Heliodorus Pillar, one of the most famous example of Indo-Greek cultural integration, located near Vidishi in modern Madhya Pradesh. This ancient monument tells a remarkable story how foreign officials embraced Indian religion and their philosophy. Heliodorus was an ambassador sent by Indo-Greek king. He became a devoted follower of Vasudeva. The pillar contains an inscription where Heliodorus declares his devotion to Vasudeva, referring him as God of gods. Now come to the evidence of coins. Most of what historians know about Indo-Greek rulers comes from the coin discovered throughout northern India. During archaeological excavation, Indo-Greek coins were made from gold, silver, copper and nickel. Most Indo-Greek coins features images on both sides, typically showing a Greek or Indo-Greek king on one side and religious figure on another side. Here is the example of Indo-Greek coins. You can say here is the feature of king and here is the image of any deity. Next is some coins also featured important Indian deities such as Vasudeva Krishna, Lakshmi, demonstrating how these foreign rulers also adopted Indian religious traditions. Now the Indo-Greek rule eventually came to an end when another group known as Shakas took over. They ruled a large part of northwestern India around 2nd century BC to 4th century CE until the arrival of Kushanas. The Kushanas eventually displaced the Shakas in the north. Now come to the most significant historical marker from this period is Shaka Samvat calendar. For example, right now we are using Gregorian calendar. During that period of time, they used Shaka Samvat calendar, which begins in 78 CE. Although it is popularly known as Shaka Samvat, many historians believe this era was started by the great Kushan Emperor Kanishka to mark his rise to power. This calendar is still important today and was adopted as India's national calendar. 1957, it is used alongside the Gregorian calendar. Now come to the emergence of Kushanas. Kushanas are very powerful. Here are the Kushana Empire. You can see in the map in the western side, or you can say northwestern side of the Indian subcontinent. The Kushanas were originally from Central Asia and entered the Indian subcontinent around 2nd century CE. These skilled warriors, traders gradually established one of the most powerful empires in ancient Indian history. The founder of Kushana dynasty was Kujula Kadphises, but the most famous and powerful ruler was Kanishka the Great. Kanishka is often regarded as the greatest ruler of Kushana dynasty, and his reign marked the golden age of Kushana civilization. He was not only strong military leader but also great supporter of art, culture, religion. A famous statue of Kanishka here, a headless statue of Kanishka, gives us important information about him. It features a Brahmi inscription that referred to him as Maharaja Rajadhiraja Devaputra Kanishka. That means great king, king of kings, son of god Kanishka. To show his power, to show his status during that period of time, he gave himself this name. This shows the kind of respect and power he held. Now come to the coins and religion. The coins minted during the Kushana period are great importance of historians because they provide information on the values, priorities and religious belief of the rulers. These coins also contain inscriptions and images that reveal the political and cultural context of this time. Kanishka issued coins minted by gold, silver, copper coins. On these coins, for example, Kanishka holding a sphere with the title King of Kings, while others show Buddha with his name written in Greek letters. Some coins also feature Shiva and Nandi. Here are the examples of coins during Kanishka. Next is trade and Silk Route. The Kushanas achieved much of their wealth and power by controlling important trade routes. This ancient network of trade paths connected India with other parts of Asia, the Mediterranean world, and making it one of the important and busiest route trade in the ancient world. During Kushana rule, trade expanded dramatically. Merchants travel along these routes carried not just goods but also ideas, technologies, artistic styles and religious beliefs. Here is the Silk Road. Or during the Kushana time, Silk Road and other important trade routes of the ancient world. Next is art and architecture. Art and architecture is remarkably important and remarkable contribution in art, architecture and sculpture. During this era, two major schools of art emerged, Gandhara school and Mathura school. Here are the examples of Gandhara school of art and Mathura school of art. So the Gandhara school of art developed in northwestern regions of the Kushana Empire and is famous for its fusion Greco-Roman artistic elements with traditional Indian cultural theme. This unique blend emerged because the region had been influenced by Indo-Greek kingdoms that ruled the area before the Kushanas. Next, Gandhara sculptures. are known for their realistic human features, as Gandhara artists created Buddha statues that appeared remarkably lifelike, with detailed faces, flowing robes, and calm expressions, much like found in Greek art. So it is a blend of Indo-Greek or Greco-Roman artistic element. Now come to the Mathura school of art. Mathura school of art developed in central India, especially in Mathura. The present day is in Uttar Pradesh. While Mathura artists also incorporated some foreign influences, their work remained more closely connected to purely Indian artistic styles. Here are the few Mathura school of art sculptures, and here are the few Gandhara school of art sculptures. As you can see, Buddha's facial expression here. Here you can see clothes and everything in very much in detail. Next is, these sculptures preferred working with red sandstone, which gave their sculptures a warm, rich appearance that was distinctively different from the cooler tones of Gandhar art. Mathura sculptures' figures had softer, rounder features compared to those of Gandhar artists, who preferred sharp, precise details. The rule of Kushanas shows that even during times of conflict, an empire can become prosperous and engage in creativity. Even during the time of conflict or power struggles, an empire came to become a place of great creativity and growth. When empire brings together people from different regions, it also brings new ideas, art and belief. These can mix with local tradition to create something new and meaningful. It means during the time period of war or anything, or you can say in any situation, they were flourishing. That is important. That is important for any kingdom or for any empire, and that is important today also. Thank you for the video lecture. See you in the next class.